So prior to our involvement in this project, I suppose most of you was familiar with this distinctive facade of the New Ireland Assurance building on Dawson Street, but completely unaware of its provenance and history. Fortunately, our involvement coincided with the publication of More Than Concrete Blocks, Volume 2, which featured the building. And I had the benefit of meeting with Carole Pollard, who was the author of this case study early in the art design process, and learned an incredible amount from her about the history of the building, which is, in fact, 3 phases of development with, I think, a fascinating history aligned with the growth and development of the Irish state. The building at the time of our appointment was a proposed protected structure and undergoing assessment. And despite being marketed as a demolish and rebuild opportunity, we were fortunate that our client was sensitive to the historic significance and embraced the retention and redevelopment of the buildings and the protected structure process. The timing also gave us some opportunity to engage with Dublin City Council's Conservation Department prior to their finalisation of the detail and extent of protection. The redevelopment challenge here really required us to unravel and understand the various layers of development and to distill the kind of essential historic character and to rationalise that into a plan would create a coherent and efficient workplace, which, seen in the bottom right drawing, has a main central core with, or surrounded by open plan office space with a secondary core connecting to Dawson Lane to the east. Great. New Ireland Assurance was formed in 1918 and was closely aligned to the leadership of Sinn Féin. Its establishment came from a frustration of seeing vast sums of money leaving the country to be invested in foreign firms. The company purchased 11 to 12 Dawson Street in 1923 and began the first phase of development in 1930. The first phase was designed by Vincent Kelly, whose modernist style expressed the aspirations of an ambitious and forward-thinking company. Kelly's original design, which you can see in the top left, extended to Dawson Street and would have been an extraordinary early modern addition to the city. Unfortunately, the front section wasn't constructed, obviously, leaving the existing Edwardian building to present a more conservative public frontage. The rear volume of Kelly's building, which was constructed, sets rectilinear windows in a plain rendered facade with a granite plinth at ground level. Its steel structure is encased in concrete with ribbed concrete slabs spanning the main beams. In the bottom left, you can see that during the enabling work stage, we discovered 2 relatively intact original windows which had been blocked over. These were salvaged, restored, and are now reinstated in the building and became templates for the new steel windows. The retained Edwardian building was replaced in 1964 by the highly distinctive Morris and McCullough design. New Ireland Assurance at this stage had clearly overcome any earlier inhibitions, as this modernist facade, which is described as a rare surviving example of hiberno-modernism, which features decorative elements with nationalistic expression, reflected in renewed architectural confidence and established a remarkable presence on Dawson Street. It also delivered an impressive double-height entrance lobby where customers were greeted and brought to consultation desks for medical assessment at first floor level. The boardroom, located above the double-height lobby at second floor level, has shallow balconies looking onto Dawson Street, which are decorated externally with brass panels, again featuring a Celtic motif. Finally, the third phase of the development, which is number 9 Dawson Street, was designed by Patrick Campbell and was completed in 1971 and features a very early example of curtain walling. its most distinctive feature is the fenestration pattern, which reflects the window design of the 1964 building. The different phases of development meant we had to deal with multiple conditions, different layers of construction, and the evolving techniques of their time. So, for instance, the aluminium curtain walling of the 1971 building was single glazed and presented a considerable challenge to improve its thermal performance. Initially, we considered the installation of secondary glazing system. However, this could only be achieved by the installation of a complex and bulky framing system, which would have impacted negatively on the distinctive fenestration pattern of the curtain walling. The framing effect of that fenestration against the streetscape outside, which you can see on the top left, is one of the most appealing features of the building and one we wish to retain. So instead, we opted to replace the single glazing with double glazing, which presented its own challenges, not quite as complex as what Ronan has described, but required 3 different thicknesses of double glazing units due to the limitations of the various frames of the fixed and opening sections. It also required the introduction of an independent steel support structure to carry the additional weight of the glass and resist horizontal deflection. The image next to it in the middle and the top shows the bronze alloy windows of the 1964 building, which were much more robust and already had double glazing. Now, whilst it's a little unclear if these were original, we do believe there were, these are perhaps one of the earliest examples of double glazing in a commercial building. I'm not going to go into the detail about the structural challenges we had to deal with, other than to say that it was extraordinarily complex due to the multiple phases of construction and the fact that we were adding 2 floors essentially to the building. Also there was minimal historic information available, and despite very extensive and costly opening up works and the involvement of a specialist forensic engineer, various unforeseen conditions had to be dealt with on the site. It's also worth noting that the extent of very highly engineered temporary support structures added significantly to the cost of the building. The image on the top left is taken shortly after the 1964 building was built. The impressive entrance lobby of this building was abandoned in the mid-80s when the public entrance was relocated to a smaller single-height space in the 1970s building. So sadly, the dramatic spatial quality of the light-filled lobby was extinguished, and the bronze doors were blocked up internally, and the entire double-height space was infilled for office space. So reinstating this space was central to our design, and we were determined to re-establish its grandeur and sense of welcome and the feeling that it is an extension of the public realm of the streetscape outside. Again, unfortunately, we couldn't find any photographic record of that space or even any original drawings of how it was built or how it was constructed. We relied on a brief written description from the New Ireland Assurance Archives and from drawings of the 1980s infill. If you compare the top left drawing and the drawing next, or the photograph on the top left and the photograph next to it, which was the condition when we took on the project, you can see just above the New Ireland sign, above the bronze doors, that where the floor had been infilled, they also infilled it with granite panels. And again, if you look at the original image on the left, you can see that an original canopy, a concrete canopy, had been removed. Another element or feature of the 1964 building was on each of the half landings on the central staircase, there were these very beautiful stained glass windows, which featured graphics based on Celtic imagery, again in this kind of hiberno-modern style. These have been retained. That graphic style had been developed over the years in New Ireland Assurance's annual calendar, and similar to the later Roadstone calendar, became a much sought-after collector's item. The building it's nearing completion, or the kind of shell and core stage is nearing completion, and these are images of the reinstated lobby. There are always clearly many challenges reconciling historic buildings, even modern historic buildings, with current building regulations. So, for instance, the retained protected stair in the centre, which opens onto the lobby, always opened onto the lobby, required fire separation, as it also functions. The staircase also functions as a firefighting core. And maintaining the openness of the space and the visual connection between the lobby, the stair, and the mezzanine level was resolved by the introduction of fire-resisting glazing and fire curtains. And even at that, it was an extraordinary battle with the fire officer to get agreement on that. I mean, they would have much preferred that we filled it in entirely with blockwork. In the refurbishment of that space, we also reintroduced some of the lost original materials that have been mentioned in the written description of the lobby, which described, terrazzo flooring and Connemara marble panels. Actually, we discovered that the original marble came from the family-owned Joyce's quarry in Galway, and we met Brendan Joyce, who was very aware of this through kind of family stories that his grandfather had supplied the original marble in the 1960s. Such was the prestige of being involved in such an iconic building at the time. And he was determined that the marble would, once again, which it was, supplied by their quarry, so to continue that connection. A similar connection with the original build was made during the restoration of the stained glass panels, which was carried out by the Abbey Stained Glass Studios in Inchicore. We discovered that they were also the suppliers of the original panels, and they actually had records to prove this in their archives. I don't know if anybody's ever been up there, but it's like a time capsule, and they have these rolls of drawings of everything that they created back in the day. Again, they felt heavily invested in the provenance of the building and were incredibly committed to the restoration work. There was even a personal connection for me when I realised that Vincent Kelly is actually my wife's granduncle, so it's a small world. The cleaning and the repatination of the bronze doors was carried out by Bushy Park Ironworks, and we look forward to seeing these opened again in the near future, flanking once more the entrance to this unique building. Thank you very much.